Is Castlevania Symphony of the Night the GOAT? Well, in terms of 2D games, I personally think it is. So everyone's saying, how, Ed, could you talk about the PlayStation and not talk about this game? Well, that's because I wanted to save it specially for this video. Now, I've got some cool things to say about it and some cool stories about it. PlayStation at the time of this game coming out was doing very, very well. It's already established itself in my mind as pretty much the pinnacle of video game systems at this time. So when I was looking through some video game magazines, which we still were doing at the time, I did see this game. There wasn't much on it though. You know, like people can correct me on that, but at the time there just wasn't. They were just like, there's a Castlevania game and it's coming out for PlayStation. And then it would show a couple of pictures of the actual game being played. Now remember, there's no internet, there's no YouTube, there's no spoilers of what the game was. So we knew very, very little about it. But of course we were excited to get it, but we weren't completely stoked to get it. You understand? Because we didn't know what we were getting into yet, knew nothing about it, right? Now, the concept of Symphony of the Night is not an original one, because I have to refer back to Metroid for Super Nintendo. Again, legendary title, and I would have said that that is the best 2D game until Symphony of the Night came out. And that's where we get this phrase Metroidvania when we're trying to describe games. So what Konami did was they wanted to make it more of an adventure game. They went away from the platforming style and they went more to the adventure type area. Backtracking, go here, go there. You can't progress unless you get a certain item or a certain ability, etc., etc. And I thought that that was really, really cool, really, really awesome concept, but there was just, it's still a flawed game though. We'll get into that later, but still staying on Metroid. Metroid is fantastic because it's futuristic and essentially Samus is shooting all the time. So let's just say it's a side-scrolling shooter game, right? Adventure shooting, you shoot, that's how you kill things. But in Symphony of the Night, it was all close combat, so there was no more shooting anymore. But still, look at the upgraded graphics on it. I still think that the game is absolute pixel art. You can put it on your wall, you can put it in a museum. It's great, and because it has that gothic look to it as well, you can say this looks like Renaissance paintings or something like that. And that's what I mean by pixel art. Lots of other games are still pixel art, don't get me wrong, but I think that this one is like museum artsy. So when I finally picked up the game, again, I was pretty excited to play it because I didn't know what I was getting into. Plugged it in. Well, first of all, let's look at the case artwork. Personally, I didn't like it. This is our Western version of it, and it doesn't do the game justice at all. They put the good artwork on the inside of the CD case, and they put this like generic castle that just says Castlevania on the outside of it, and they put that on the outside of the CD case, and I personally still don't even like it to this day. I still have my original copy even, but the point is that I plugged it in, and this is when PlayStation had their black discs, and I thought that was pretty cool too. Forgot to mention that before, but immediately it hit me like lightning bolts directly into my eyes. I heard the absolute beautiful orchestrated music immediately, and the second that I even saw the story credits roll and then saw Alucard for the very first time run into the castle and then saw how many frames of animation that he had on him when he moved, it was hypnotic. It was mesmerizing. And another thing too I like about it is that in all the other Castlevanias, you're always playing a Belmont. You're always playing somebody who has a whip or something like that, more or less, most of the time. This was the first time that a dedicated hero was not Simon. It was Alucard from Castlevania 3, and that was the only time you could ever really play him before. Now he's the actual dedicated character. So because they did that, think about how much more they could unlock, because now you can transform into a bat, and you've got mist form and wolf form, and you've got all these magical abilities, and you have all of these different weapons that you can switch from and items that you can use. There's just way more imaginative things that you can do with a mystical type magical vampire character than you can do with just a regular human vampire hunter. And guess what? I didn't even know Rondo of Blood even existed at this time. You know why? Because it was only available in Japan. So this was my first introduction to all these characters. I had no idea, even though the game starts off, it doesn't say Rondo of Blood, it actually says Bloodlines. And I think that's just a title of the chapter. I don't think that it's actually representing any game, because it's not called that. I mean, Bloodlines is the Sega Genesis version, so, but it's still directly connected to Rondo of Blood. And so I played that one later when we discovered emulation and all that kind of stuff, because there you go again, you can't exactly get a copy of that one very easily way back in the day when PlayStation came out. So you were forced to emulate it, and then I was just like, oh, now I get where they got those enemies from and stuff like that. It's a direct crossover. It's almost exact direct crossover between certain enemies. It's just carbon copy right over, same sprites, same attack pattern and everything like that. So I thought that was very, very cool. So when you skip the original one, like, so, and I mean that in any games, if there is a game that you didn't get a chance to play because it didn't come out in your country, and then you skip it, and then you go right to the one on top of it that's even better than the one before it, it's quite mind-blowing. I thought it was. So it's just like jumping right into the deep end of like the best of the best of the best right away. And that's basically what Symphony of the Night is. So the only game that has ever dethroned it in my mind, and these are 3D games, was Bloodborne, and then the only one that dethroned Bloodborne was now Elden Ring, which is pretty much the newest one, right? So that is technically the best game I've ever played, but still Symphony of the Night is the greatest 2D game I ever played. Is it flawless? No. Now I'm going to tell you why. This is what I wanted changed about the game. For starters, I thought the difficulty was too low. Now, you can't adjust the difficulty in the game, and I'm not a fan of that in any way. I hate difficulty sliders in any games because I think it's more or less cheating. And so I just thought that the difficulty was a bit too low. Even when you make it through the first part of the castle, when you get to the upside down castle, the difficulty amps up a little bit. But I wanted maybe a third area, or maybe even the second area, to be like Castlevania NES difficulty. Make it really, really tough, you know, but it wasn't that difficult to defeat the entire game. And then it's over, and then you're kind of sad and depressed because there's no real replay value in the game, other than you want to go through it again and maybe try to collect. You can grind a lot in it and try to collect secret items and weapons that you never got before. Also, there are no pits of death in it, which I thought was a traditional Castlevania thing. So instead what they did was they made it so that the entire area, the entire map is all enclosed. So you can't fall down any pits of death, and there's no insta-kills either. There are spikes around and spikes on the floor in some places, but they don't kill you right away. And you can say, oh, Ed, yeah, but Alucard can transform into a bat, and he can transform into mist. So it'd be pointless because you could just transform before you went into the pit of death. Yeah, well, you don't get that. You don't get those transformation things immediately, right? So they still could have put it in, ramp up the difficulty a little bit more. Not only that, I would have thought that it would have been better if you couldn't transform into the bat and the mist form for very long periods of time, which you could in it. And I liked it in the original Castlevania 3, where you couldn't transform into the bat for very long. And that game had pits of death as well. So that's it. I can't really think of anything else more to say about this game that hasn't been said a million times, but those are my personal stories with it. I played it over and over and over again, even all throughout my life, even up to this point. I have it on my PlayStation 5. They came out with that collector's edition that you can download that comes with Rondo of Blood as well. I had the one for PSP that was also Rondo of Blood that was in 3D. It was the only 3D version of it. I've bought it and rebought it forever and ever, and I always usually in one point of time like to just sit down and play it, because I think that it's just it's just good in terms of, like, you can never get sick of a movie like Jaws or something, you know, like when it was that big mind-blowing period of time when this one thing would come out and it would change not only the genre, but it would change everything forever in that media field. Whatever it may be. It could be a song, it could be a movie, and it could be a video game. You know what I mean? It's any one of those, and Castlevania is definitely on there. So I really, really thank Konami for coming out with that one, because it is so amazing that I don't even have the vocabulary anymore to continue with it. So that's it. Thanks a lot, guys, again, for watching. If you want to see me talk about another retro game over, click over here. You click over here where my finger is touching over here. And then if you want to subscribe, if you're new here, click over here in this bubble, and you can hover over and it looks cool too, or else, my dog will eat crap tonight.